I'm not only disappointed, but I'm also frustrated over this entire subject, which is why I am making a part two. And there's also an additional piece of footage that I will be showing you guys that really just boiled my blood. And that's why I am going to be giving you extra information as to why video games are not to blame for the recent events that have occurred in the United States over the past 72 hours or so. And before we even move forward, I do want to say once again, my heart goes out to the friends, the family, and the people especially that were directly affected by these events. Now, with that being said, I'm also not going to be showing any type of Call of Duty footage out of respect due to the situations. But I also want to say, I feel like a lot of news media coverage are trying to basically stretch out and make it something that it really isn't, which is why news and the president are even blaming video games for the recent events that have occurred. I think it's pretty ludicrous. I also think it's a business, and it's also the unfortunate truth of what we are living in the day and age of social media, digital media, news media networks trying to cover anything and everything that they can in order to basically make these news anchors' salaries. I just think it's really despicable and sickening. But I do want to say that we're going to be rolling the tape because what made my blood boil the other day was Donald Trump's statement regarding video games and how they apparently affect our recent gun violence that has occurred. Roll the tape.
We must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence.
I feel like politicians are not educated at all from this subject. They're just blaming video games to blame video games. There's no reason as to why they need to do that unless they were bribed or even laundered or lobbied money in some way, shape, or form. But I don't think a lot of these people, including the president, have actually analyzed any type of data regarding any type of quote-unquote correlation between video games and gun violence. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be showing you some very valuable data in a minute. But I also want to say I feel like the president definitely just didn't do his research, was probably told this by one of his people, of the members of the cabinet, and simply just, made his statements to make them. And now, based off of his statements, it's a vicious cycle because the news media, social media, whether it's, on the phone or it's, media on the TV, news, they're basically trying to use the president's statements, whether you're on the left or the right in terms of a political approach, are now going to be talking about this for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 days now because of what he said. And it just, once again, constantly stretches out that content, constantly will give the news anchors something to talk about. And I feel like the victims, the pure victims in this scenario, are not the people that play video games. It's the people that were shot and killed or injured from the shooting. It's almost like they're mocking them in a certain way, because if I got shot and the news was saying, oh, Cryptix got shot because of video games, I would scoff at them and spit in their faces, because you know what actually did the damage? The person with the gun that pulled the trigger. Based off of the president's recent analysis, if you want to call it something like that, it would be as if, there's car accidents. People get killed in car accidents, unfortunately. But it's the car's fault, right? It's the car's fault. It's not the drunk driver that was behind the wheel. It's not the sick person that decided to get behind the wheel and run over 10, 15, 20 people in a crowd. No, it has nothing to do with that. It's the Audi A7's fault. It's the BMW i8's fault. That's whose fault it is. It's not the person's fault. It's the car's fault, clearly, right? But in all honesty, I really don't know what to say. I think I'm dumbfounded by a lot of what news is covering nowadays, and it's making me a little bit less inclined to watch the news, because I think they're just doing this for the business now and not to actually cover legitimate news based off of facts and analysis. Now, with that being said, I am going to be showing you a chart, but before I do so, I do want to say, it's from Vox. Now, I've covered Vox in the past. I have definitely said that they are having some type of agenda. They're left-leaning. They tried to suppress Steven Crowder and all that. I usually do not agree with them at all whatsoever. And in conjunction with that, I also think a lot of the people under Vox are basically trying to compete with people on YouTube, so they try to bash YouTube in any way, shape, or form, as well as its creators. So keep all of that in mind. A lot of their news and data is also irrelevant or makes absolutely no sense, but I did double check the sources underneath this chart that I will be showing you, and it is 100% accurate. I double checked everything, so let's just show it on the screen. It actually shows you the video game purchases that were made in the year of 2019, and it also shows you the gun violent deaths statistics based off of 2017. Now, I obviously know there is some discrepancy because, you got video game purchases in 2019, then you got the violent gun deaths in 2017. I just want to say, first and foremost, that the gun violent deaths that have occurred in the United States have actually skyrocketed even since 2017. So that already says enough about it. But it also shows you the video game revenue and purchases that were made in 2019. So even if you were to compare the gun violent deaths in 2019 to the video game purchases in 2019, it would relatively be the same exact chart. So keep all of that in mind. Now, with that being said, let's take a look at this chart, shall we? So first of all, it shows you South Korea came in first place for video game revenue, as well as China, the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and Japan. Now, what do you see a little bit odd about this chart? So if you compare the United States video game revenue to violent gun deaths per 100,000 people in 2017, you're going to realize that, yeah, there is just the United States having all of these violent gun deaths in conjunction with all of the video game purchases that were made from other countries. If video games are such a problem and they're sold worldwide, why is it that the United States only has these mass shootings? Why isn't it that, the United Kingdom or Canada or Italy are having all of these violent gun deaths, these mass shootings? Why isn't China just, constantly limiting their population, not trying to be funny here, based off of all the gun deaths, right? Because there are none. There really are hardly any gun deaths compared to the United States. And I believe personally, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here, but don't worry, it is pretty legitimate. I think the chart speaks for itself, and other charts actually exist on the internet, but do make sure that the sources are correct and the data is correct. But I do want to say that I think a lot of what we're not focusing on is mental health. I also believe social media is one of the core reasons as to why all of these mass shootings happen. It's the reason why a lot of these unfortunate events happen. It has nothing to do with Call of Duty. It has nothing to do with Battlefield. It has nothing to do with first-person shooter games. It has nothing to do with that. The shooter's manifesto for the El Paso shooting actually involved Call of Duty. He said Call of Duty inspired him. Do you really honestly believe that? No. He's putting that in his manifesto so he can get even more fame even after his death or jail time. Just like all of the other shooters that have done this, they've actually had people in the past that have said, oh, subscribe to PewDiePie in their manifesto, as well as screaming it while they're gunning down innocent civilians. It's because the shooters get their 5 minutes of fame on social media, and even then some, because now the news media is actually even talking about this person, 4 days after the event? I mean, they're doing this on purpose, guys. They're involving video games and Call of Duty in their manifesto on purpose, because the second one of those shooters pulls the trigger and kills innocent civilians, they're number one trending on Twitter. They're talked about on news media networks. They're talked about on Instagram. They are everywhere. They're in YouTube videos such as this one. But my focus of this video is to prove to you guys that video games have nothing to do with the violence. Why did I come out okay? Why am I, the one making YouTube videos? I've been playing Call of Duty for 10 plus years now. I have not once in my entire life, in my entire existence, ever wanted to gun down an innocent civilian. I've played No Russian in MW2, which is one of the most violent missions in video game history. Probably the most controversial mission in video game history. And I never, not even once, tried to even think about doing anything close to that in real life. Video games are video games, and there's a lot of studies to prove that video games have actually reduced the amount of violence that has occurred around the world because it gives you an escape. It gives you some type of thing to do, whether it's a violent video game or a non-violent video game, in your free time. So it's actually reduced the amount of crimes, it's actually reduced the amount of violence, and the only discrepancy that happens to be in this chart is the United States. Why is the United States easily having the most gun violent deaths compared to all the other countries? It has nothing to do with the video game purchases, as you know from Vox. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with mental health and social media. It has absolutely nothing to do with Call of Duty or Battlefield. So that's basically my rant, guys. I hope you all did enjoy this video. I think I put the nail in the coffin here, and hopefully we never have to talk about this subject ever again. I am disappointed that a lot of people are actually feeding into this and believing it, and I just want to prove to you guys that that's not the main issue. And the sad truth is that since a lot of politicians and news media are basically trying to blame video games for the recent events, it's going to get glossed over, forgot about, and then it's going to happen in a month. And people are going to wonder why we have the most gun violence in our country. It's because we never do anything about it. So that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm Cryptix, not blaming video games for gun violent deaths, and I'm signing off.